Great morning, y'all. Buenos dias, or whatever time you're watching this. So, first things first, I know it may be a huge difference that you see about me. I went and got my hair braided the other day. Um, but one of the things I wanted to talk about before I get started is I've just been feeling like spiritually just attacked recently. I've been having thoughts that, if I should keep doing this, because I know like reading can get real boring, especially reading the Old Testament. But I'm just praying for the strength to make it through, and I ask y'all to pray for me as well. And I mean, I just continue to feel led to continue reading. It just takes a lot of work, it takes to kind of sometimes edit these videos, post them, and then like the captions. It can be a lot to do every day. So I kind of took a little break for the past 3 days, and now I'm back. And so I just wanted to say that y'all keep me in your prayers, and just prayers for strength to just keep pushing. All right, so Leviticus 11, 12, and 13. So let's get started. Leviticus 11. Rules about eating meat. The Lord said to Moses and Aaron, "Tell the Israelites, these are the animals you can eat. If an animal has hooves that are split into two parts, and if that animal also chews the cud, then you may not eat the meat from that animal. Some animals chew the cud, but they don't have split hooves. Don't eat these animals. Camels, rock badgers, and rabbits are like that, so they are unclean for you. Other animals have hooves that are split into two parts, but they don't chew the cud. Don't eat these animals. Pigs are like that, so they are unclean for you. Don't eat the meat from these animals. Don't even touch their dead bodies. They are unclean for you." Rules about seafood. You may eat everything that lives in the water, in the sea, or in a river that has fins and scales, but you must not eat anything that lives in the sea or in a river and does not have fins or scales. Just the thought of eating such a creature should make you sick. This will never change. So don't ever eat meat from anything like that. Don't even touch his dead body. It is a sickening thought for you to touch anything that lives in water and does not have fins and scales. Birds that must not be eaten. You must also treat some birds as things that are wrong to eat. Stay away from them. It is a sickening thought for you to eat any of these birds: eagles, vultures, buzzards, kites, all kinds of falcons, all kinds of blackbirds, ostriches, nighthawks, seagulls, all kinds of hawks, owls, cormorants, great owls, water hens, pelicans, carrion vultures, storks, all kinds of herons, hoopoes, and bats. Rules about eating insects. Don't eat insects that have wings and crawl. Even the thought of eating them should make you sick. But you may eat insects if they have legs with joints above their feet so they can jump. You may also eat all kinds of locusts, all kinds of winged locusts, all kinds of crickets, and all kinds of grasshoppers. But stay away from the other insects that have wings and crawl. They will make you unclean. If you touch the dead bodies of these insects, you will become unclean until evening. If you pick up one of these dead insects, you must wash your clothes. You will be unclean until evening. More rules about animals. Some animals have split hooves, but the hooves don't make exactly two parts. Some animals don't chew the cud. Some animals don't have hooves. They walk on their paws. All these animals are unclean for you. If you touch them, you will become unclean until evening. If you pick up the dead bodies of these animals, you must wash your clothes. You will be unclean until evening. These animals are unclean for you. Rules about crawling animals. These small animals are unclean for you: moles, mice, all kinds of great lizards, geckos, crocodiles, lizards, sand reptiles, and I don't know I forgot how to pronounce this. Chameleons. Whoever touches their dead bodies will be unclean until evening. Rules about unclean animals. If any of these unclean animals dies and falls on something, that thing will become unclean. It might be something, chameleons, I think that was the word. It might be something made from wood, cloth, leather, or sackcloth. Whatever it is or it is used for, it must be washed with water. It will be unclean until evening. Then it will become unclean again. If any of these unclean animals dies and falls into a clay dish, anything in the dish will become unclean. And you must break the dish. If water from the unclean clay dish touches any food, that food will become unclean. Any drink in the unclean dish will become unclean. If any part of a dead, unclean animal falls on something, that thing is unclean. It may be a clay oven or a clay baking pan. It must be broken into pieces. These things will remain unclean. They will always be unclean for you. A spring or a well that collects water will remain clean, but anyone who touches the dead bodies of an unclean animal in that water will become unclean. If any part of a dead, unclean animal falls on the seed that is to be planted, that seed is still clean. But if you put water on some seed, and if any part of the dead, unclean animal falls on those seeds, they are unclean for you. Also, if an animal which you use for food dies, whoever touches its dead body will be unclean until evening. If you eat meat from the animal's body, you must wash your clothes. You will be unclean until evening. If you pick up the dead body of the animal, you must wash your clothes. You will be unclean until evening. You must treat all crawling animals that live on the dirt as disgusting things that you must not eat. You must not eat any of the reptiles that crawl on their bellies, or that walk on 4 feet, or that have many feet. Don't eat these animals. Don't let them make you filthy. You must not become unclean, because I am the Lord your God. I am holy, so you should keep yourselves holy. Don't make yourselves unclean with these crawling things. I, the Lord, brought you out of Egypt so that you could be my special people, and I could be your God. I am holy, so you must be holy too. These are the rules about all the tame animals, birds, and all the animals in the sea, and all the animals that crawl on the ground. These rules will help the people know which animals are unclean, and which animals are allowed to eat, and which ones they cannot eat. Leviticus 12. Rules for new mothers. The Lord said to Moses, "Tell the Israelites, when a woman gives birth, she will be unclean, just as she is during her monthly time of bleeding. If the baby is a boy, the mother will be unclean for 7 days. The baby boy must be circumcised on the 8th day. Because of the blood from childbirth, another 33 days must pass before she can touch anything that is holy. She must not enter the holy place until the time of her purification is finished. But if she gives birth to a girl, the mother will be unclean for 14 days, just as she is during her monthly time of bleeding. Because of the blood from childbirth, another 66 days must pass before she becomes clean. After the time of her purification is finished, the new mother of a baby girl or boy must bring special sacrifices to the meeting tent. She must give her sacrifices to the priest at the entrance of the meeting tent. She must bring a 1-year-old lamb for a burnt offering, and a dove or young pigeon for a sin offering. If the woman cannot afford a lamb, she may bring 2 doves or 2 pigeons, young pigeons. 1 bird will be for a burnt offering, and 1 for a sin offering. The priest will offer them before the Lord. In this way, the priest will make her pure, and she will be clean from the blood of childbirth. These are the rules for a woman who gives birth to a baby boy or a baby girl. Leviticus 13. Rules about skin disease. The Lord said to Moses and Aaron, someone might have a swelling on their skin, or it may be a rash or a bright spot. If the sore looks like a disease of leprosy, the person must be brought to Aaron, the priest, or to one of his sons, the priest. The priest must look at the sore on the person's skin. If the hair in the sore has become white, and if the sore seems deeper than the person's skin, it is leprosy. When the priest has finished looking at the person, he must announce that the person is unclean. Sometimes there is a white spot on a person's skin that does not seem deeper than the skin. If that is true, the priest must separate that person from other people for 7 days. On the seventh day, the priest must look at the person again. If the priest sees that the sore has not changed and has not spread on the skin, he must separate that person for 7 more days. 7 days later, the priest must look at the person again. If the sore has faded and has not spread on the skin, the priest must announce that the person is clean. The sore is only a rash. After washing the clothes, the person will be clean again. But if the rash spreads over the skin after the person has shown himself to the priest to be made clean again, that person must come again to the priest. The priest must look, and if the rash has spread, he must announce that the person is unclean. The disease is leprosy. Whoever has leprosy must be brought to the priest. He must look at that person. If there is a white swelling on the skin, if the hair has become white, and if the skin looks raw in the swelling, it is leprosy that has been there for a long time. The priest must announce that the person is unclean. He does not have to wait until after a period of separation because he already knows that the person is unclean. Sometimes a disease will spread all over a person's body, covering the skin from head to foot. The priest must look at the person's whole body. If the priest sees that the skin disease covers the whole body and that it has turned all the skin white, the priest must announce that the person is clean. But if the skin is raw, that person is not clean. When the priest sees the raw skin, he must announce that the person is unclean. The raw skin is not clean. It is leprosy. If the raw skin changes and becomes white, the person must come to the priest. The priest must look at the person. If the skin has become white, the person who had the infection is clean. The priest must announce this. Someone might get a boil on their skin that heals over. Then the boil might become a white swelling or a bright white with red streaks in it. If this happens, the person must show the spot to the priest. The priest must look at it. If the swelling is deeper than the skin and the hair on it has become white, the priest must announce that the person is unclean. The spot is leprosy that has broken out from inside the bull. But if the priest looks at the spot and there are no white hairs in it, and the spot is no deeper than the skin, but is faded, the priest must separate the person for 7 days. If the spot spreads on the skin, the priest must announce that that person is unclean. It is an infection. But if the bright spot stays in its place and does not spread, it is only the scar from the old bull. The priest must announce that that person is clean. Someone might get a burn on the skin. If the raw skin becomes a white spot or a white spot with red streaks in it, the priest must look at it. If that white spot seems to be deeper than the skin and the hair on the spot becomes white, it is leprosy that's broken out in the burn. The priest must announce that the person is unclean. But if the priest looks at the spot and there is no white hair in the bright spot and the spot is no deeper than the skin but is faded, the priest must separate the person for 7 days. On the 7th day, the priest must look at the person again. If the spot has spread on the skin, the priest must announce that the person is unclean. It is leprosy. But if the bright spot has not spread on the skin but has faded, it is only a scar from the burn. The priest must announce that person is clean. Someone might get an infection on the scalp or beard. A priest must look at the infection. If the infection seems to be deeper than the skin, and if the hair around it is thin and yellow, the priest must announce that the person is unclean. It is a serious skin disease. If the disease does not seem deeper than the skin, but there is no dark hair in it, the priest must separate that person for 7 days. On the 7th day, the priest must look at it again. If the disease has not spread, and there are no yellow hairs growing in it, and the disease does not seem deeper than the skin, the person must shave. But the diseased area should not be shaved. The priest must separate that person for 7 more days. On the 7th day, the priest must look at it again. If the disease has not spread and it does not seem deeper than the skin, the priest must announce that that person is clean. After washing those clothes, that person will be clean. But if the disease spreads on the skin after the person has become clean, the priest must look at the person again. If the disease has spread, the priest must not need to look for yellow hair. The person is unclean. But if the priest thinks that the disease has stopped and black hair is growing in it, the disease has healed. The person is clean, and the priest must announce this. If anyone has white spots on the skin, a priest must look at them. If the spots on the person's skin are dull white, the disease is only a harmless rash. That person is clean. A man might begin to lose the hair on his head. It is only baldness, so he is clean. A man might lose hair from the sides of his head. He is clean. It is only another kind of baldness. But if there is a red and white infection on his scalp, it is a skin disease. A priest must look at him. If the swelling of the infection is red and white and looks like the leprosy on other parts of his body, then he has leprosy on his scalp. The person is unclean. The priest must announce that he is unclean. People with leprosy must warn other people. They must shout, "Unclean, unclean." They must tear their clothes at the seams. They must let their hair grow wild, and they must cover their mouth. They are unclean the whole time that they have the infection. They are unclean and must live outside the camp. Some clothing might have mildew on it. The clothing could be linen or wool, woven or knitted. Or the mildew might be on a piece of leather or on something made from leather. If the mildew is green or red, it must be shown to the priest. The priest must look at it and put it in a separate place for 7 days. On the 7th day, he must look at it again. It doesn't matter if the mildew is on leather or cloth, or if the cloth is woven or knitted. And it doesn't matter what the leather was used for. If the mildew has spread, the object is unclean because of the infection. The priest must burn it. If the priest sees that the mildew did not spread on the object, it must be washed. It doesn't matter if it is leather or cloth, or if the cloth is knitted or woven. It must be washed. He must order the people to wash it. Then he must separate the clothing for 7 more days. After that time, the priest must look at it again. If the mildew still looks the same, the object is unclean. It doesn't matter if the infection has not spread. You must burn that cloth or piece of leather. But if the priest looks at the piece of leather or cloth and the mildew has faded, he must tear the infected spot out of the piece of leather or cloth. It doesn't matter if the cloth is woven or knitted, but the mildew might come back to that piece of cloth, leather or cloth. If that happens, the mildew is spreading and the object must be burned. But if the mildew did not come back after washing, that piece of leather or cloth is clean, whether the cloth was woven or knitted. These are the rules for mildew on pieces of leather or cloth, whether the cloth is woven or knitted. Alright, and that is Leviticus 11, 12, and 13. So let's talk about it, because I'd be hearing like a lot of word about these type of scriptures, and so I wanted to kind of break it down, or at least give some kind of context. So we have to remember that in the Old Testament, when we read all of these rules and laws and everything, keep in mind that this was during the time of Moses and during the time of Joshua and during their time. So like all the rules fit for their specific time in that context. And so it wouldn't make sense or be smart for us to take these rules and laws, and granted these are, rules that our world can follow as well too, some of them. But it's important to know that this was like the covenant that God made with the people, with them at that time. So it don't make sense for us to try to take some of these rules and put it into our specific lifetime, because the rules are different, and the traditions and the cultural values and all of that is different. And that was the commandment and commitment that they had in that time. And so I don't want to like share too much, because we actually gonna read through, once we get into the New Testament, and it talks about, not being under the law. So at the time, there was like an analogy that somewhere in the Bible where it talks about how it kind of compares the law to being like a guardian or a parent. And so basically, when a child is growing up, the parent and the guardian kind of guides them and give them leadership until they get to a point to where they're grown. Well, in relation to this, at that time they were instructed to follow the law, and then in the New Testament, Jesus came and basically he redeemed us from solely following the law, and he came to make it make more sense, because at the time when Jesus came, they were so focused on following the law that they weren't actually living, like having great moral heart, and wasn't doing things in kindness. It was more so just about, I need to follow this law, this law, this law. Like, you got to follow it to a T, versus like actually having a heart posture. And so it's one scripture that talks about how it's not what you put inside of you that makes you unclean. It's what comes out of you that makes you unclean. And so it's talking about, it's all about the heart. But see, at this time, it was basically all about the laws that they needed to follow in order to be made clean or unclean. So that's it. I just wanted to get that little snippet. But yeah, we see the rules about what they should eat, how they should, what they must not eat, all of these things, all of these different animals that specifically clean or unclean. And then in Leviticus 12, it talks about new moms and how they are unclean and have a purification process to go through after they have their child, which is interesting, as well as during their time of the month as well too. They're unclean. And then in Leviticus 13, it talks all about the skin disease. It goes into detail about what the priests need to do and what he need to look for and how often, and just basically letting people know their verdict. either you clean or unclean, based on how the skin looks and the boils and all of these different things. So yeah, that's all for today. I hope y'all have a blessed day, and you continue to come back to my videos, and let's read through this thing, and let's get more knowledge and get deeper into this word. All right, y'all have a blessed day. Peace.